Hi, everyone, and welcome to NBTV, where we bring you all the latest news in privacy. And you are watching our first ever Privacy Beat show. This segment is called Get Off My Digital Lawn. It encapsulates exactly what we're going to talk about here, which is how to retain your privacy, what privacy issues are going on in the news that you should be aware of. We're going to give you all of that information. So in today's show, I've got some juicy topics to dive into. First of all, we're talking about Google's privacy plans that it turns out aren't so private. So we'll dig into the details there, what they actually have entailed and what they have planned and why it's really not all it's cracked up to be. Then we're going to go on and look at what's going on in Texas. Apparently, Meta is being sued for billions of dollars for privacy violations, collecting a bunch of metadata that they shouldn't have been, and collecting a bunch of biometrics that they shouldn't have been. So we'll dig into that. And then super excited to have a very special guest on today's show. We're going to be talking to Asra Nomani. She's the Vice President of Strategy and Investigations at the Parents Defending Education. And we're going to be diving into a surveillance program that has been put forward that seems pretty insidious when it comes to monitoring children's activities. So she will explain to us what's going on there, dive into all the details. But let's start off by talking about Google. So they announced this week that they will begin removing ad trackers on its Android operating system to improve user privacy. Sounds pretty good. They put out this blog post you can see on the screen there. They proposed changes which include eventually phasing out advertising ID, which is a special code that's assigned to each Android device, which allows advertisers to build specialized profiles and serve targeted ads. It's very similar to what you have on iOS. They have like a similar unique identifier on their devices, but Google didn't provide a definitive timeline in their blog post, but they did say that, existing technologies would be supported for at least the next 2 years. Now, the blog post, they're talking about this privacy sandbox. That's what they're calling it. And let's just first of all look at what they're saying about this. They say, today we're announcing a multi-year initiative to build a new privacy sandbox on Android with the goal of introducing new, more private advertising solutions. And specifically, these solutions will limit sharing of user data with third parties and operate without cross-app identifiers, including advertising ID. We're also exploring technologies that reduce the potential for covert data collection, including safer ways for apps to integrate with advertising SDKs. So it all sounds very interesting, but there was some pushback from articles. For example, Gizmodo came out with an article and they made a great point. They said that Google's $150 billion ad business is literally built on tracking users virtually everywhere they go. So they don't see how this could coincide with them suddenly adding user protection, privacy protections that stop this tracking. It seems like this is really inherent in the Google business model. So there are a lot of questions that come up there. Now, in their announcement, Google, they don't call out Apple by name, but they do say how other platforms have taken a different approach to ad privacy and how this is the wrong one. So what they do is they link to a study that talks about Apple's privacy tracking pop-up, which I thought this was one of the most interesting things about all of this, because Apple, they've been doing a big privacy push, and we know that last year they opted in with their new iOS version. They opted in to have pop-ups appear on your screen that says, allow app to track you, and you can click no, and it feels great, right? So there's a study which actually goes into whether this helps or whether this is just the illusion of privacy. The study wasn't too complimentary. It said that this app tracking transparency, ATT is what they call it, it claims to give users a choice and transparency for third-party tracking of their apps. And it was lauded as, a step forward for protecting privacy. But in their study, and there was a study done by ex-Apple engineers whose mission is to increase transparency in technology, they selected the top 10 ranked apps, all of which were featured by Apple's own app store. And when it comes to third-party trackers, app tracking transparency apparently is a dud. That was news to me. I did not realize that. And they said it's more insidious than that because it gives people a false sense of privacy. People who otherwise might have been more cautious with giving their data to an app might let their guard down because they think that clicking that, do not track me button is going to stop third-party tracking. So I thought that was a very interesting nugget in all of this. They basically compared all of that tracking that happened. They just didn't see any reduction in actual tracking. And the biggest part of this is because Apple kind of backed down on this system. They went from it being a full-blown, we're going to stop you effort. Facebook pushed back and said, this is going to cost us $10 billion. And then they turned around and said, okay, we'll make it an honor system. We'll say you can collect data, but you have to put it in these cohorts and it can't be personally identifiable information. But obviously, Apple has no idea whether you're collecting that and using it before anonymizing it or after. So it is like this strange, system that's an honor system, and it makes sense that it's actually not making a real dent in privacy. I'm really disappointed in Apple for backtracking on that and for making it an honor system. But then, Google is kind of, I feel like they're pot calling kettle black here because they're citing this article saying that Apple's doing it the wrong way. But I have a lot of questions about how Google plans to make things more private and plans to stop all of this tracking when their entire business model rests on it. So we're going to be digging into the details of that as they come to light and letting you know about that. But this was the initial announcement that came out. Let's move on to our next topic here. I'm talking about what's going on in Texas. So apparently, Texas is suing Meta. If you're confused about Meta is the new name of Facebook. Now that they're going into this whole metaverse push, and Texas is suing them over their facial recognition. So they're saying that the social media giant violated privacy protections, and the state is seeking billions of dollars in civil penalties, which is huge. So apparently in Texas, there are all these laws around what biometric data can be collected from users. So apparently there was a similar lawsuit filed under Illinois' biometric privacy law. Both of the laws in both states require individuals' consent before their biometric identifiers can be captured. And what Facebook has been doing is collecting all this information, collecting photos, studying these photos, mapping them to identities on the internet, like doing all this stuff. And Facebook's pushing back. I should say Meta is pushing back. This name's confusing. Meta is pushing back. They're saying, no, we abided by the law. We got consent. They may be referring to those trillion-page long consent documents that people really, ignore and just click, okay, I've read it every time it comes up. So there may be a case there if Texas is saying, no, you didn't actually let consumers know about this, then obviously it's unreasonable to expect them to read all of these updates and privacy and supposed consent that they're giving. So this will be an interesting case to see go through because we're so used to data that it's being put out there. It's just it seen as us giving our data away when we use these apps. And I think when you ask most individuals if they would have wanted that data to be given away or collected or analyzed, they probably wouldn't have given their outright consent. But these things are kind of hidden under terms of services. It's all a little bit insidious. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this lawsuit. And that is a huge sum of money, like billions of dollars that they're seeking. So yeah, interesting to see what happens there. But let's move on to a big block for today. We're talking about a program that is being introduced in Fairfax. So the public school portal released this document that said we are seeking to implement this program. It is going to collect and analyze the social media data, the data of students across the interweb, and we're going to be collecting that information in perpetuity. We're going to be combing through it. There's a whole lot to dive into. So I wanted to invite onto the show Asra Nomani. She is the Vice President of Strategy and Investigations at Parents Defending Education. And she has been a staunch advocate of privacy in this regard, has been pushing back against this proposal. But welcome to the show, Asra. Oh, got sound? Sorry, Asra, we don't have sound for you. There we go. We've got you now. Welcome to the show,
Oh,
Asra.
oh, great. It's wonderful to be with you. And I'm a child of West Virginia, so I really appreciate your theme today of get off my digital front yard. It's a great
Yeah.
concept. I love it.
Get off my digital lawn. Well, in this
Yes.
case, it seems that Fairfax does not want to get off the digital lawn of
No.
students. It does seem like an incredible overreach that they're going into the private, internet lives of students, and they're basically like drawing identifiers between people to establish connections. They're looking at photos to wanting to analyze connections between people, create relationships, create this database that
Yeah.
comprehensively analyzes this information and stores it in perpetuity of children. So walk
Yeah.
me through the issues with this and why this is something that you think is important to fight against.
Yeah, on your metaphor, it's not that they are only on our digital lawn. They've literally like parked their RV there now with their satellite system and every other device that you could know that engages in this phenomena that the intelligence community calls open source intelligence. They literally call their data mining now open source intelligence in this request for proposal that was just put out in November 2021. And the backdrop is really important for folks because everybody knows, the controversy from post 9/11 of the Patriot Act, right? We know that that was used as a device to investigate terrorism, and there were abuses with it. Well, fast forward to 2021, 20 years later, and the National School Boards Association decided in late September 2021 that they were going to go after the parents that they now accused of, quote, domestic terrorism. Well, they got the DOJ involved and they went to the White House. The parents, pushed back on it. And by October, the School Board Association had issued an apology. But lo and behold, in November, Fairfax County Public Schools puts out this request for proposal. And what they are asking a vendor to do is data collect on not just students, but parents or anybody on social media that engages with the quote brand of Fairfax County Public Schools. And we know exactly what kind of dragnet trouble that can get anybody into when they put such a big dragnet out there. And unfortunately, the school board has used the excuse of school safety to try to justify this monitoring. But everybody should be troubled because you indeed will end up in this database.
Yeah, it's a database that they say also they're going to be collecting this in perpetuity. So let's go over some of the specific criteria that they've laid out here. So they say that all of the data, as you said, is open source intelligence stuff that's in public domain. But we're going to be collecting it and analyzing it. We're going to be doing false positive reduction with embedded violence language, classifiers, and metadata, optimization technology, all fancy ways of saying like we are going to be going through and tagging all of this and putting labels on it, classifying it in this database. They're going to be automatically classifying aliases, usernames, emails, websites, etc. So if you have a pseudonym that you're using, they're going to be finding ways to track that, connecting that to real identities. We're visually identifying relationships and connections between people, which means, we just talked earlier on the show about Meta, how, Facebook had this program where they're looking at all your photos, they're learning about people's identity, they're using biometric identifiers. That's the sort of stuff we're talking about, is that like your photo goes out there, suddenly it's identified by to your real world identified
Right.
identity. But the final thing here, no limits on searches or the amount of data that can be saved. We're going to save search queries and set alerts for active listening. It's just like the ability to scan all of the private lives of students. So, it's a pretty scary proposal if you think about children saying
Yeah.
things off the cuff, and in the digital world that kind of gets captured forever. What are the dangers of this to like the development of students?
Oh, yeah. This is so disturbing because we all know that there are protections for children, especially when it comes to data and also social media. We have FERPA, we have PPRA. There's all these acronyms. The FERPA is about the protecting privacy for children. PPRA is for protecting their own data. Then there's beyond school systems, there are bumpers, right, on children and online presence and how much you can monitor them, collect, even engage with them. Well, these guys are just basically creating this, unregulated surveillance program. And it's not just going to be the kids that they are including in their dragnet, because as we know, parents are very much engaged with school systems. And then what if my mom likes a post that I make about the school system? This is going to be a problem. She's going to be added into their little database. And Naomi, this is so troubling because I'm sitting here in Fairfax County, Virginia. It is virtually, the intelligence hub of the world. We have the CIA down the road. We've got Defense Intelligence Agency down the Potomac. We've got all sorts of acronyms of these intelligence organizations here. And suddenly the school district's not supposed to be in that business. We have a police department. We have an FBI. They're not supposed to be in this business. And you know as well as I do that we're in a crisis today. The learning loss, kids aren't in school. Oftentimes they are, just struggling because of the pandemic. The school systems need to focus on educating our kids instead of trying to collect data on them.
Yeah, and we've got to also talk about whether this is the most effective way to help students. Let's say they identify, a problem child. Like, is collecting something that they set off the cuff and storing it in a permanent database even the most effective way of dealing with this? But
yeah, such a good point.
Yeah, I wanted to go to a soundbite from, there was this meeting, Scott Brebrand, who's is the district superintendent, I believe. He was saying some things. Yeah. So let's go to him and see what he had to say.
That work is around student safety. We know social media has become part of the threats that we've seen from student to student.
It's
so disturbing.
It's still part of the threat. Social media is part of the threat. And so let's go back to the most effective way to handle this supposed threat. Do you think that it's collecting everything that a child says on the whim and collecting it in perpetuity in this database associated with them and tagging it? Or are there better ways to handle treatment of children?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mom, right? And the best way that we can manage and help anybody in society is person to person, right? They use the example of the school shooter in Michigan as an example of the kind of threat that they would be able to detect. Well, that kid was known to his teachers. He did a drawing in school that they talked to his parents about. And so and everybody in the intelligence community also knows that the best information that you can gather on anybody is human intelligence. It's person to person. And that's also the best intervention that we can have. I mean, a bunch of tech bros, analyzing kids' social media accounts is not going to save and make our schools more safe and secure. Not at all.
Yeah. And let's dive into why that is, because this isn't something that just applies to schools and to children and this particular proposal. It's the whole underlying premise of why mass surveillance doesn't work, because they're doing this dragnet capture of all of this data and it's being stored in these databases. And it's like finding these so-called terrorists or calling people out for bad behavior before it happens, preempting it. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, and it doesn't work. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Like, we need situations where we have warrants, where we're actually going into people's accounts because we have a probable cause, and that's how you get leads on these things. The mass surveillance that happens, this dragnet capture, actually doesn't help anyone. It just ends up being this collection of data that could be used retroactively to target people, dissidents, people that go against the grain.
Right, exactly. Like, everybody knows very well, the concept of the social credit, right, that countries like China are putting forward, where they are, creating the good guys, the good citizens, the bad citizens lists. Well, I just want to widen the lens for viewers a little bit also and let you know that not only is this social media surveillance part of the package of what school systems are doing, but every day in schools across the country, children are getting things that are called surveys and screeners put forward by big tech companies with names like Panorama Education and Castle. And these are companies that individuals like Mark Zuckerberg have invested in, even Ashton Kutcher, the actor. What they do is they ask kids the most intimate questions about their sexuality, their identity, their feelings about race, in this sort of new world in which they want to understand how kids are feeling. Well, all that data is going to these kind of data storage facilities where a bunch of tech bros, again, no offense to them, love them for their job that they should be doing, but not this kind of surveillance of our kids. And literally, they're calling this an analysis of kids' psychometrics. And then guess what they're doing, Naomi? They are creating, with the example of Panorama Education, something that they're calling an early warning system. And so a kid gets in this database and they're either given a red light, a yellow light, or a green light. And just today, I heard about these kind of companies, one of which has an entire dossier on a child, including the yoga, a video of a yoga that she did in a class. And this is following the kids, much like these social credit systems that are being put forward by totalitarian regimes.
Wow, a social credit system for children. That's
Yes.
terrifying.
Isn't it? I mean, thank you so much for letting me just explain that to people, because we have thought for so long that children were off limits, when it came to protections in society. We knew that they are sacred, and we know that. But unfortunately, they have become a market for these big tech companies. And I just want folks to know that there are parents, fighting this in school systems. They report to us every day. There's something that you can do in schools to opt out your kid instead of opting them in for these surveys and surveillances. They have to opt out. But guess what? Even when they opt their kids out, the data is going to these companies. The kids are still being told to take the surveys by their teachers. And so you know how it is. I mean, school systems are overloaded already with jobs that they got to do. Now they're like the survey monkey for big tech on our kids' minds. Like, it's so unbelievable. And yet, as you know, it's industry, right? It's a multi-million-dollar industry, and they see a market here with our kids.
Yeah, it bothers me that, and I know Snowden's talked about this a lot in his memoirs, where he says how the early internet, it was this wonderful place where you could connect and you could freely talk about ideas, and it very much mimicked real life, where you would say something, it would just, be transitory, it would disappear once you say it, right? The early internet was like that because you could say something online and it would just be lost forever. So you could feel free to explore ideas. And what we have now, we've transitioned to this world where you say something online and it's there attached to your identity for all time. And how does that affect a child who is interacting with their peers online? They're trying to figure out their views about their world. They're formulating ideas. They're playing with ideas. They say something, it's no longer transitory. It's no longer disappearing into the ether and being lost in time. It's now attached as this permanent part of their identity. That's a really scary prospect for me. And it makes me wonder how it's going to affect children's development.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, this is the generation of the screenshot, right? And so whether you're on Snapchat or whether they're in a Discord channel, they know when their peers, their friends have crossed the line. And they may not do it intentionally to, bully or to have leverage over another kid. But these kids are the masters of screenshots, and they have their own little repositories of what their friends have said, and they've got the goods on them. They've got the receipt on them. So that's kids, as they're acting with kids. But we should not be doing this as adults on children. And to again, show people how big this is. This is a piece of paper with the contract that Fairfax County signed with Panorama Education. Folks are not going to be able to see this very well, but the image up here in the far corner is our U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Why is he connected to this story? Well, over here is a lovely picture of a couple. And this couple is his daughter and his son-in-law. And his son-in-law is one of the co-founders of Panorama Education, which is data mining our children's information today, doing these psychometric surveys, putting them in this early warning system. And this is the man who acted on that request by the School Board Association to get parents off their backs, right? So they're going after parents, they're going after children, they're going after the public. And what is it that all of us seek? We seek transparency, we seek good governance, we seek accountability, and unfortunately, we have an entire political system that is using all these different levers of surveillance and threat and intimidation to silence everyone. And that's not a good development for our society and our democracy.
Oh, absolutely. We should never be silencing people. I hate this trend in society where we default to silencing and stopping conversations. Like, that's the way to make a movement fester and bad ideas fester. Have these dialogues in the open and allow the best arguments to win. That's how you have a civil society. I mean, the only other thing that I'll mention about this, I thought it was hilarious, actually. This entire proposal for creating a system that's analyzing all this data and doing dragnet capture of, these students' social media actions, they're estimating a $200,000 budget. Now, if you don't know anything about tech salaries, that might pay for like a low-level engineer for, if you're lucky, maybe it pays for them for a year. But like, really, I mean, this isn't going to get you very far. The program that they have outlined is like a multi-million-dollar proposal. Right. So the fact that they can't even get their budgeting right for this, and these are the people that you want to put in charge of protecting that data at the end of the day that they're collecting. Like, this is like you're thinking that they're competent enough to actually protect the data on your children. I mean, they're out to lunch.
Yeah. And you can just see them sitting around saying, oh, gosh, they're just bothering us so much on, Twitter. And we can see it. Like, we are studying their social media behavior. And we see who follows whom, who blocks whom, the entire engagement of government officials on social media has become another part of our own study as citizens of society. Well, these guys sitting around coming up with a contract that most companies would not even like pay attention to, right? But somebody is going to say, oh, Fairfax County Public Schools, guess what? You know what their budget is? It's $3 billion. So they are going to think to themselves, wow, we can get our foot in the door. And one little contract just stays there, right? It balloons and balloons and balloons. And so that's what we really need to see this as, like a red flag for what may be cooking up down the road.
Yeah, and it's all leading towards this. I mean, they're cooking up so many things. On my other show on Fridays, we talk about cryptocurrency. I mean, finance is another area of society where the surveillance is just getting more and more. And now they're talking about this centralized currency where they're going to track every financial transaction. And like, it's going to be this opaque system where only the bureaucrats get access. I mean, it's like there's surveillance in everywhere. And I hate to see this starting at the young age with our children, because that's not how we should run society at all. I do want to mention we had a super chat from Cable Jones who said, thank you, Naomi, for bringing this to the public. Thank you, Asra, for bringing this to the public. I really appreciate you and you sharing your insight into this. But thank you, Cable, for your support of the channel. I really appreciate that. But anything final words that you think that we should mention about this that people should know? Because I think this is just the beginning. We have Fairfax talking about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see other school districts jumping on board and it just kind of flying under the radar.
Well, Naomi, you just brought up a really great point, earlier when you were just talking about like allowing kids to be kids. I mean, how many of us had just like really ridiculous ideas when we were 10 or 13 or 15 or later? Life is about evolving, right? And we have to allow kids to evolve in their self-expression and really support them and not make them feel like we are literally in, not only on their front yard, right, but in their bedroom, right, on their phone with them. I mean, this has just gone too far. And ultimately, what do we all want? We want children to grow up to be healthy, positive, well expressed and self-expressed human beings as adults. We want them to be healthy parts of our society. And so we have to really give them as much positivity as we can. So I hope everybody will just check out what's going on in their school district on our website, defendinged.org. We have a great little easy button that you can press. And if you're afraid to report this and talk about it publicly in your school system, because folks are afraid of retaliation, send us a tip, tell us, and we'll investigate it, because we're following the money. We are holding these school districts accountable, and our ultimate objective is to allow these kids to be kids and just enjoy their lives and grow up to be great citizens in society.
Absolutely. And so that website, again, if people missed it, defendinged.org, and you can learn more about this. And so you can submit if you find out that there are similar insidious plans going on, you can submit that, and then they know about it. They can help get exposure. Great resource there. We did get another super chat as well from Jeff Leopard. Oh my gosh, and another one from Anthony Monroe. People love you, Asra. People I really appreciate this. So Jeff says, how can I or we invest in that privacy phone, and can you add a cold wallet to it? So for those of you who don't know, we did a video recently that talked about de-Googling your phone, how to create a phone with the most hardened software operating system. It's called Graphene, and basically is just, I mean, Edward Snowden recommends it. Every security expert recommends it. So I did a video explaining to people how to do that to your phone, how to overhaul the system and have more privacy. So how can we invest in that privacy phone? Well, you could go and create the privacy phone yourself. Just follow my tutorial. I am still thinking about the logistics of pre-installing that for people and selling it, but it's not there yet. I know, Jeff, you really want it, so I'm still thinking about that. And there's some interesting announcements from Graphene itself as well, so I'll be updating you all. And they say, can you add a cold wallet to it? No cold wallet, because your phone is linked to the internet. So we'll dive into that in another video. And Anthony Monaco also gave a message here and said, hello, Naomi, good to see you. He has been a member of NBTV for a while. So, thank you, Anthony, for all of your support. All right, Asra, final thoughts on this as we wrap up. We've got your website. We know where to find you going forward. What are some final thoughts just as we close up this segment?
Well, just talking about the technology that you just shared about protecting our phones as adults, like I imagine you wouldn't have thought that we needed to do the same with our children, that we need to set up like privacy walls and screens for them too. But that is where we're at today as a society, because these poor children, these beautiful children, have been deemed a target and a market for many companies that want to profit off of the information that they've got in their minds and in their lives. And so we have to be vigilant. Like, that's what we say at Parents Defending Education, that we must remain vigilant in order to have democracy thrive. And so please join us. We are here, moms and dads, just like many of you. And whether you have children or you don't, we are all in this together for the kids.
I absolutely agree. And we're very privacy focused on this channel. You guys can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. where we dive into something that's going on the news cycle about privacy, or we give you great tips, or we have wonderful guests like today with Asra Nomani. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And we got a lot more coming. So we'll be on again, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We'll keep diving into this, keeping you guys updated. But thank you to everyone for watching today's show. This has been so wonderful having you here. This is our first Privacy Beat show. So let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this format. We are going to be having a live show about privacy on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then a show about cryptocurrencies on Fridays. So diving into the news cycle for that every Friday at 4 p.m. So thank you guys for tuning in, for being here, for chatting, for liking, for sharing, subscribing. All of that helps us get visibility. YouTube does its best to try and hide our content. So all of that stuff does help us in the algorithm, and we appreciate you. Thanks for chatting here. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for all the super chats and the support. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you soon. Oh, Anthony just sent a super chat. Oh gosh, we're leaving the show. Anthony, thank you so much. I'm not sure if we can bring that up onto the screen. I'm going to see. Gonna see. All right, bring that up on the screen, Anthony. I really appreciate that. And also, send us your messages in the chat. As we go through the show, let us know as we go, so that you're letting us know which parts you enjoy the most, which stories you like the most, because we're reading those very closely, and we're taking your feedback and focusing on things that are interesting. Well, another super chat from Cable Jones. Oh my gosh, guys, this is going to be an hour-long show. We're gonna hang out here and get super chats. I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. And this song that you're hearing at the moment, this is YT Cracker. It's called Bitcoin Baron. And if you hang around on the show long enough, you may hear me rapping through the credits when I accidentally forget that my microphone's turned on. So
just do it. It's live. Just do it.
Just my producers in my ear say, "Just do it, Naomi." I don't think the people are ready for that sound. They'll have to stay tuned for the next segment to dive into the rap cycle. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap that up there. That was an unintended pun. Wrap that up there. Love you guys, and we'll chat to you soon. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.